Imagine being one of the 12 people responsible for deciding the fate of one of the most famous music moguls in the world, Sean "Diddy" Combs, a man whose name alone conjures images of platinum records, celebrity parties, and an empire built on hip-hop dominance. Yet, despite the glitz and glamour, the courtroom paints a starkly different picture, one of allegations, controversy, and shocking revelations that shook both jurors and the public alike. The Netflix docuseries Sean Combs, The Reckoning, doesn't just retell the headlines. It takes viewers inside the courtroom, behind closed doors, and into the minds of those who ultimately decided his fate. At the heart of this story is a question that fans and critics alike have been asking for years. Can someone who lived such a larger-than-life existence be held accountable for actions that crossed the line? The stakes were monumental. Combs, a 56-year-old music mogul whose career spans decades, was facing serious federal charges, including prostitution-related allegations and accusations of sexual misconduct. While the world watched in anticipation, the jurors were tasked with a responsibility that would affect not just Combs' life, but set a precedent in how high-profile figures are judged by the law. Juror 75, one of the 12, put it plainly in the Netflix docuseries. "We saw both sides of it, and we came with our conclusions. Justice was served 100%. That simple statement captures the tension, confusion, and immense pressure of a case that drew media scrutiny from every corner of the globe. But what does justice really mean when a public figure like Combs is involved? How do jurors reconcile a man who has entertained millions with the allegations that threaten to destroy his reputation? These are the questions the docuseries explores in vivid detail, offering a perspective rarely seen outside the courtroom walls. The introduction of this saga isn't just about the charges, it's about the contrast between Combs' public persona and the private actions alleged in court. There's an undeniable drama in the tension between who he is on stage and who he is accused of being behind closed doors. The Netflix series doesn't hold back, giving audiences intimate interviews with jurors, former associates, and even accusers, creating a multi-layered narrative that keeps viewers on the edge of their seats. And then there's the question of timing. Combs was arrested in September 2024. A series of raids hit his homes, and suddenly the man who had spent decades curating his public image was facing the unflinching glare of the law. The world watched, rumors flew, and social media exploded with speculation. Sean Combs, The Reckoning, picks up at this exact moment, exposing the tension, the secrets, and the drama that the public only glimpsed through headlines. By the end of this introduction, viewers are left with one unavoidable thought. This isn't just another celebrity trial. It's a complex story of power, influence, love, betrayal, and the harsh consequences that even the most untouchable figures may face. And as we dive deeper into the details, from juror insights to shocking courtroom revelations, it becomes clear that every piece of this puzzle has a story worth uncovering. The question now isn't just whether Combs is guilty or innocent. It's about understanding the layers of a life lived in the public eye, where fame and controversy are inseparable. What happened in that courtroom? How did the jurors come to their verdict? And what does it mean for one of hip-hop's most iconic figures? Stick with us, because the answers are more shocking than you might expect. The courtroom was tense. Cameras weren't rolling inside, but the anticipation outside was palpable. Every news outlet, every social media feed, and every fan of Sean "Diddy" Combs was watching, waiting to see if the music mogul's larger-than-life persona would survive the harsh scrutiny of the law. When the verdict finally came, it was a split yet decisive moment that left both shock and reflection in its wake. Out of 12 jurors, Combs was found guilty on 2 prostitution-related charges, a decision that, for some, confirmed what they already suspected about the darker sides of fame. Juror 75, one of the 12 who deliberated, reflected on the gravity of their responsibility. "We saw both sides of it, and we came with our conclusions. Justice was served 100%. Those words might seem straightforward, but they carry a weight few outside the jury room can truly grasp. Serving on a case like this isn't just about reading evidence or listening to testimony. It's about weighing the human elements, the fear, the manipulation, the complexities of relationships, and the hidden truths behind the public image. For the jurors, the decision wasn't easy. They had to separate the man they had seen in headlines, photos, and music videos from the actions alleged in the courtroom. The guilty verdict meant that Combs would face a 50-month prison sentence in New Jersey, with his release scheduled for June 2028. It was a moment that shocked fans, disappointed supporters, and sparked intense debates online. How could someone with such influence, money, and power be held accountable? And yet, the jury's conclusion wasn't a blanket condemnation of Combs' entire life. It was narrowly focused on specific charges, highlighting the delicate balance of justice. Interestingly, the split nature of the verdict, guilty on some counts, acquitted on others, left many confused. The public's perception of justice often demands a black and white outcome, guilty or innocent. But in reality, the jury's work is nuanced. They examined evidence, testimonies, and relationships, then made choices based strictly on what they believed could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Combs' acquittal on the more serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering underscored this complexity. It was a reminder that even in high-profile cases, the law demands meticulous scrutiny, not public opinion. Yet the guilty verdict on prostitution-related charges didn't stop the media frenzy. Headlines screamed, social media debates flared, and fans dissected every public statement. Some saw it as a victory for justice, a rare moment when a celebrity faced consequences. Others questioned the process, wondering if Combs' fame and influence had shaped the outcome in subtle ways. Juror 75's comments suggest the jury wrestled with this too, fully aware of the global spotlight, yet determined to deliver a verdict based on facts and evidence. This verdict also set the stage for broader discussions about accountability, power, and celebrity culture. The world watched as the legal system navigated the delicate terrain of wealth, fame, and personal responsibility. And while the sentence would eventually be served, the cultural and personal impact of the verdict, both on Combs and on the public's perception, was only beginning to unfold. But that wasn't the whole story. Juror 75 hinted in the Netflix docuseries, teasing the shocking testimonies and revelations that would later come to define the trial. Because in this case, the courtroom drama wasn't limited to legal charges. It extended into private lives, complex relationships, and shocking behavior that would leave even the most seasoned jurors stunned. When the courtroom doors closed and the testimonies began, all eyes were on Cassie Ventura, the singer, model, and Sean Diddy, Combs' former girlfriend who became the prosecution's star witness. Her presence in the trial added a personal, human element that jurors could not ignore. Cassie's testimony wasn't just about dates, locations, or financial transactions. It was about the intimate, often harrowing details of her relationship with one of the biggest names in music. She spoke about manipulation, coercion, and the complex power dynamics that existed behind the glamorous public image of Combs. For viewers, the details were shocking, but for the jurors, it was a window into a world they could scarcely imagine. Juror 75 described their reaction to Cassie's testimony as a mix of fascination and confusion. "That was a very interesting relationship," he said. "Two people in love, they are like overly in love. You cannot explain. She wanted to be with him. He took her for granted. He never thought that she'd leave." The jury had to navigate the murky waters of emotional entanglement, a love story twisted by allegations of abuse and coercion. Cassie's account detailed days of orchestrated sexual acts with male sex workers, all of which she claimed she was pressured into performing. It painted a picture of a relationship where affection and exploitation were tightly intertwined, leaving jurors questioning the boundaries between consent, influence, and power. What made her testimony even more perplexing to the jurors was the apparent speed at which she and Combs seemed to reconcile after confrontations. Juror 75 recalled, "The very next day, they're getting back together and exchanging text messages like nothing ever happened. He's beating her, then next minute they're going on dinners and trips. It's just back and forth. If you don't like something, you get out. You can't have it both ways, have the luxury, then complain about it. I don't think so." For the jurors, this contradictory dynamic added layers of complexity, making it harder to separate truth from perception, love from manipulation. Cassie's testimony also forced the jury to consider the psychological aspects of abusive relationships. The oscillation between affection and aggression, control and intimacy, was a real puzzle for those tasked with judging Combs' actions fairly. It wasn't just legal evidence they were evaluating. It was the nuanced, often confusing human behavior that occurs in high-pressure, emotionally charged situations. Outside the courtroom, the public followed every snippet of her account, dissecting interviews, leaked court notes, and media coverage. Fans debated, critics weighed in, and social media was flooded with opinions ranging from sympathy for Cassie to skepticism about her claims. This media pressure created an additional layer of stress for jurors, who had to remain impartial despite the overwhelming public chatter. Cassie's testimony ultimately became one of the most compelling pieces of the trial. It wasn't merely about the charges. It was about understanding a private world where power, love, and manipulation collided. Jurors had to reconcile the glamorous, commanding public figure of Sean Combs with the allegations of coercion and exploitation. And as they left the courtroom each day, the question lingered. How could someone so admired publicly be involved in such troubling personal dynamics? It's a back and forth that left the jury and the public stunned, Juror 75 said, setting the stage for the deeper allegations and shocking videos that would later come to define the trial's narrative. The story was far from over, and the next revelations would push the boundaries of both legal judgment and public perception. While the courtroom focused on specific charges, there was another undercurrent that left jurors and the public stunned: the specter of domestic violence. Although it wasn't one of the formal charges, certain evidence and testimonies suggested moments of aggression that were impossible for jurors to ignore. Juror 160 described her reaction to the Intercontinental video, which allegedly showed Combs acting violently toward Cassie Ventura. "Based on that, he can be unforgivable, honestly. You can't beat that small girl like that the way he did. But domestic violence wasn't one of the charges," she said. These words highlight the tension jurors felt, navigating a case where the legal scope didn't always align with what they witnessed or inferred from the evidence. This aspect of the trial revealed the challenges of trying a celebrity whose personal life is so intertwined with public perception. Combs has spent decades crafting an image of charm, charisma, and control in the music industry. On stage, he's a larger-than-life performer, commanding attention and respect. But in private, according to testimonies and videos presented in court, there were darker moments, episodes of control, intimidation, and alleged violence that jarred the jurors, forcing them to weigh character evidence carefully against the specific charges before them. Juror 160's perspective underscores a crucial dilemma. How do you separate legally actionable offenses from behavior that is morally troubling but not explicitly illegal under the charges being tried? The jury had to focus on prostitution-related allegations while simultaneously absorbing the uncomfortable implications of abusive behavior in the private sphere. For some, this created a cognitive dissonance, a gap between the public persona, the private actions, and the limits of what the law can prosecute. The jurors also considered the context of the relationship between Combs and Cassie Ventura. Their back-and-forth dynamic moments of reconciliation immediately after confrontations complicated perceptions. Juror 75 described it as a cycle that was difficult to parse. One moment, affection; the next, aggression. It forced the jury to grapple with human psychology, the nuances of intimate relationships, and the power imbalance between a wealthy, influential figure and a partner in a vulnerable position. These complexities made it clear that understanding Diddy's behavior required more than just a review of evidence. It demanded empathy, discernment, and careful judgment. Outside the courtroom, public conversations about domestic violence were amplified. Fans, critics, and media personalities debated what the videos and testimonies suggested, often clashing over interpretations. Jurors, however, had the unenviable task of remaining impartial while managing the weight of these perceptions. They had to deliver a verdict based strictly on the law, even when confronted with moments that were ethically troubling but not directly prosecutable. Ultimately, the domestic violence element added depth to the trial, highlighting the moral and psychological layers beneath the legal proceedings. It underscored the challenges of judging someone like Sean Combs, a man who had dominated the entertainment world for decades yet was revealed to be deeply flawed in his private life. The jurors' struggle to reconcile these realities serves as a powerful reminder. Legal justice is precise, but human behavior is rarely straightforward. What does this say about the man behind the music? Juror 160's comments leave viewers pondering a question that goes beyond the courtroom, about power, influence, and accountability in the lives of celebrities whose actions ripple far beyond the legal wreckage. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Sean Diddy Combs trial wasn't just the evidence presented in the courtroom. It was the jury's struggle to separate the man's public persona from the allegations at hand. Celebrities live their lives under the constant gaze of fans, paparazzi, and the media, which can blur the lines between myth and reality. For Combs, this meant that every decision, every piece of testimony, and every video scrutinized in court carried extra weight. Jurors had to navigate not only the legal complexities, but also the cultural perception of a man who had dominated hip-hop and entertainment for decades. Juror 75 admitted he didn't know much about Combs before the trial, since he isn't a music fan, while Juror 160 grew up hearing about the artists Combs worked with but wasn't particularly a follower. This contrast is significant. Some jurors came in with little preconceived notions, while others had faint impressions shaped by the media and music industry. Both perspectives shaped how they processed the evidence and testimony. Being unfamiliar with Combs, celebrity allowed some jurors to evaluate the case more objectively, focusing purely on what they saw in court. Others had to actively unlearn public impressions to avoid bias, a challenging task when dealing with someone whose name is synonymous with fame, success, and influence. The jurors' insight also highlighted how celebrity culture can complicate justice. Social media, tabloid headlines, and entertainment reporting often reduce complex human behavior to simple narratives: hero or villain, innocent or guilty. In reality, the truth often exists in shades of gray. Jurors had to contend with the dissonance between the charming, confident mogul portrayed in interviews and performances and the troubling allegations presented in the courtroom. For some, this meant reconciling admiration with doubt, while for others it required suspending cultural impressions entirely. Public perception also played a subtle but persistent role outside the courtroom. Fans and critics debated every leaked testimony, social media post, and news update, creating an environment of constant scrutiny. Jurors were instructed to avoid outside influence, but the omnipresence of Combs' fame couldn't be completely ignored. Every juror, whether knowingly or subconsciously, carried the tension of public opinion, understanding that their decision would resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Additionally, the jurors' observations revealed the human side of evaluating a high-profile defendant. They weren't just assessing legal evidence. They were trying to understand complex interpersonal dynamics, psychological factors, and the influence of wealth and fame. Juror 75 noted the difficulty in parsing Combs' behavior toward Cassie Ventura, describing the rapid cycle of affection, reconciliation, and aggression as both confusing and frustrating. The jury's challenge wasn't merely determining guilt. It was grappling with human behavior in its messy, contradictory form. Ultimately, the public perception versus jury insight layer of the trial underscores an important lesson. Celebrity doesn't exempt anyone from accountability, but it does complicate the process of justice. Jurors must navigate fame, influence, and media narratives while remaining true to the law. For Combs, this meant that his carefully curated public image could neither shield him from the legal consequences of his actions nor fully explain the troubling behavior alleged in court. court. And yet, as jurors reflected, how much do we really know about someone whose life is so public yet so private? The answer, they realized, required looking beyond headlines and music videos, into the courtroom, the evidence, and the human complexities that define the trial itself. The drama surrounding Sean Diddy Combs didn't begin with the courtroom testimony. It started months earlier with a series of shocking legal moves that left the public stunned. In September 2024, Combs was arrested at a Manhattan hotel following a grand jury indictment, triggering a cascade of events that sent shockwaves through both the music industry and mainstream media. Multiple raids on his homes unveiled a side of Combs' life that few had glimpsed before, and the sheer scale of the operation underscored the seriousness of the federal investigation. The arrest was not just a headline. It marked the beginning of an intense legal saga that would unfold in dramatic detail over the coming months. For many, the arrest was surreal. Combs, a man who had spent decades cultivating a larger-than-life image as a mogul, producer, and performer, was suddenly stripped of that aura of untouchability. The juxtaposition of fame and accountability became painfully clear. No amount of celebrity, wealth, or influence could shield him from the law. Public reactions were immediate and polarized. Some fans expressed disbelief and defended their idol, while others felt justice was finally catching up with a figure whose power often seemed limitless. Social media, as always, amplified the reactions, creating a relentless dialogue that blurred the lines between news, rumor, and speculation. The sentencing phase of the trial brought further attention. In October 2024, Combs was handed down a 50-month prison sentence for the prostitution-related charges, with credit for time served. For those following the case, this outcome represented a sobering moment, a reminder that celebrity does not exempt one from legal consequences. Jurors, who had spent weeks evaluating testimony, evidence, and personal accounts, had now delivered a verdict that would profoundly impact Combs' life. The sentence also sparked broader debates about the criminal justice system, its handling of high-profile defendants, and whether the punishment truly fit the crime. Beyond the formal sentencing, Combs faced an ongoing legal fallout. Multiple civil lawsuits alleging sexual assault and related misconduct continued to loom over him, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled legal web. These lawsuits, while separate from the federal trial, highlighted how public figures can be held accountable in multiple arenas, both criminal and civil, and how one high-profile case often triggers a cascade of additional scrutiny. For jurors, this underscored the broader responsibility of evaluating each charge independently, without allowing media noise or ongoing legal battles to cloud their judgment. The arrest and sentencing also illustrated a fascinating interplay between celebrity culture and accountability. For decades, Combs had navigated the entertainment world with charisma, networking, and strategic partnerships. Yet, when confronted with the law, these tools were no longer enough. Jurors and the public alike were forced to reconcile the gap between the powerful image presented in music videos, interviews, and red carpet appearances, and the allegations brought to light in court. This tension formed a core theme of Sean Combs, The Reckoning, which delves into both the procedural aspects of the trial and the human consequences of fame colliding with the justice system. So what happens next for one of hip-hop's biggest moguls? For Combs, the answer was both legal and cultural. The 50-month sentence served as a tangible consequence, yet the ongoing lawsuits, media scrutiny, and Netflix documentary ensured that the court of public opinion remained ever vigilant. In many ways, the fallout from the trial extended far beyond the prison walls, shaping perceptions, influencing future legal challenges, and continuing to define the legacy of a man whose influence on music and culture is undeniable but now forever shadowed by controversy. As the trial concluded and Sean Diddy Combs began serving his sentence, the story took another dramatic turn, this time in the world of entertainment. Netflix released Sean Combs, The Reckoning, a docuseries that promised to go beyond the headlines, exploring the rise, fall, and controversial moments of one of hip-hop's most iconic figures. For viewers, it was a chance to peek behind the curtain, seeing the man behind the empire not just through legal documents and testimony, but through intimate footage, interviews with former associates, and accounts from accusers themselves. The series became a lightning rod for debate, fascination, and criticism, proving that Combs' story was far from finished. The docuseries doesn't just tell a linear story. It's constructed to immerse viewers in the complexity of Combs' life. The glitz and glamour of fame contrasted sharply with the troubling allegations that led to his conviction. Netflix included candid juror reflections, like Juror 75's assertion that justice had been served, alongside emotional interviews with Cassie Ventura, who recounted her experiences. This combination of perspectives created a tension-filled narrative that kept audiences on edge, wondering how a man so publicly admired could be implicated in such dark personal allegations. However, the release of the series sparked immediate controversy. Combs' spokesperson, Judah Engelmayer, publicly condemned the project, calling it a shameful hit piece. Engelmayer argued that Combs had been documenting his own life since he was 19, intending to tell his story on his terms, and that Netflix's use of this material, produced by someone who had long criticized him, was fundamentally unfair. The involvement of Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson as a producer further inflamed the situation. Known Known for his long-standing rivalry with Combs, 50 Cent's role added a layer of personal tension, suggesting that the docuseries was not just about recounting history, but also about framing Combs' narrative through the lens of someone who had publicly opposed him for years. This controversy raised questions about objectivity, bias, and the power of media in shaping public perception. Netflix positioned the series as an investigative and revealing account, but critics and supporters alike debated how much of the story was framed for sensationalism. Did the series fairly represent the complexities of the trial, the relationships, and Combs' personal and professional life? Or did it focus on controversy and scandal at the expense of nuance? These questions fueled social media debates, further blurring the lines between entertainment and real-life accountability. The docuseries also highlighted a modern reality. In the age of streaming and instant access to information, celebrities cannot control the narrative entirely, especially when rivals, media companies, or disgruntled associates are involved. For jurors and the public, this meant that the story of Sean Combs continued to unfold beyond the courtroom, with the Netflix series acting as both reflection and amplification of his legal and personal troubles. It was a vivid reminder that fame carries not only influence but scrutiny, and that the consequences of actions, legal, ethical, or personal, can be immortalized in the public eye. The feud behind the scenes might be as explosive as the trial itself, some viewers observe, and in many ways this is true. Between the legal verdict, ongoing civil suits, and now a high-profile documentary, Sean Combs' story is no longer confined to the music industry or the courtroom. It exists as a cultural phenomenon, a saga of power, rivalry, love, betrayal, and the harsh spotlight of both justice and media. As the dust settles on the courtroom drama, the Netflix docuseries, and the legal battles, one question remains. Was justice truly served for Sean "Diddy" Combs? For jurors like Juror 75, the answer was clear. We saw both sides of it, and we came with our conclusions. Justice was served 100%. But for the public, for fans, and for critics, the story is far more complicated. The trial, the verdict, and the subsequent media coverage have exposed a side of Combs that many had never seen, a man who is both a cultural icon and a deeply flawed individual, navigating the consequences of his actions under the relentless scrutiny of the world. The 50-month prison sentence he received for prostitution-related charges marks a tangible outcome of the trial, but it's only part of the picture. Combs was acquitted on the more serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering, which highlights the nuanced, sometimes frustrating reality of the legal system. Justice, as delivered in this case, is precise and bounded by law. Yet, when fame, wealth, and public opinion collide, the lines between moral judgment and legal accountability blur. For the jurors, this distinction was clear. They had to base their decisions solely on evidence presented in court, separating what they personally believed or felt from what could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The case also sheds light on the challenges of evaluating human behavior, particularly when complex relationships and power dynamics are involved. Cassie Ventura's testimony, describing coercion, abuse, and a tumultuous love-hate dynamic with Combs, forced jurors to confront uncomfortable realities. The back and forth of affection and aggression, reconciliation and conflict created layers of complexity that the jury had to parse carefully. It revealed that even for a man celebrated worldwide, private behavior can carry consequences, sometimes visible only in courtrooms or captured on video. Beyond the legal implications, Combs' story is now a cultural phenomenon. The Netflix docuseries amplifies the narrative, combining juror insights, interviews with former associates, and intimate footage to create a multifaceted portrait of a man whose life has been lived in the public eye. The involvement of Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson as a producer, along with Combs' own public denouncements of the project, underscores the high-stakes drama surrounding not just the trial, but the story itself. Fans, critics, and observers are left to interpret the events through layers of media framing, personal bias, and public fascination. The broader takeaway is that fame and power do not grant immunity from consequences. The Combs case serves as a reminder that the public personas of celebrities often mask complex realities, and accountability can manifest in both expected and unexpected ways. Legal verdicts, media portrayals, and personal narratives intertwine to create a story that is never simple, never static, and always open to interpretation. So what does this mean for Sean Combs? His legacy is now inseparable from this legal and cultural reckoning. He faces time in prison, ongoing civil lawsuits, and the scrutiny of millions who continue to debate his actions. Yet, despite all this, his influence in music and culture remains undeniable. The final thought lingers. Can someone reconcile immense talent and fame with serious personal failings? Or is this just the beginning of a story that will continue to evolve in the court of public opinion? One thing is certain, Sean Combs' story is far from over, and the world will be watching every step of the way.